Hello, I'm Adrian Ashton, and welcome to this video that's designed or been recorded to walk you through the constitution of your charity. So as a new trustee or a trustee to be, the aim of this video is to help you to get to better grips with the rules of the Friends of Victoria Park Stretford Charitable Incorporated Organisation. Now, this is particularly important because your constitution, as you may have picked up from the other videos we've got in this series, is a really important and key document to what you need to know. It sets out the powers you have as a charity and the powers you have as trustees. It lets you know the limits of where you can get to, and also what the procedure should be in the event of certain large governance issues taking place. However, so it's really useful, but it's written in legalese. It's written in charity law speak. So the purpose of this video is not to give you a word-by-word translation, an ongoing definition, but just to take you through the main parts of it and guide you through what they mean in practical terms. So, first part of the Constitution, to dip in straight away, and I'll just pick up my handy laser pointer for this one, to highlight the sections as we go through. Pretty straightforward. What's the charity called? Friends of Victoria Park Stretford. Great. What are its objects? Now, this is a key one. This sets out what the charity has been established to achieve, for whose benefit and in what ways. This sets out the scope of its reach. This guy says it can do anything it wants as long as it falls within this definition. The definition says it's designed, it exists to benefit people who live in Stretford. Now, that doesn't mean if you haven't got a Stretford postcode, you're excluded, but it means that the charity should focus to the best of its ability, all of its efforts, all of its activities, so that the majority of the people it engages with, the majority of the people who benefit, are living and based and working in Stretford. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. And it's to provide or assist in the provision of facilities for recreation and other leisure time occupations. So it's to provide activities, services, things that people can enjoy, things that give people a break, things that people mean they can enjoy life more. And the purpose of doing that is to improve their conditions of life. So it's to make life better for people. So this idea of saying we're going to put on recreational activities, leisure pursuits, that's fine. That's a front. That's the means through which the charity can improve the quality of life for people. And it does this in any way it wants, but in particular, the particular focus is on Victoria Park and managing that site and running activities and services within it and around it. Okay, so that's that first bit there. That's the purpose. That's the key thing you need to know. Next part, so section 4 says essentially the charity has the powers to do what you would pretty much expect it would need the powers to do. It can borrow money, it can employ people, it can take on property, it can trade, everything it would need to do in order to fulfill its activities. Okay, pretty straightforward. Number 5 is also a key one. So all charities are bound by this. All of the income that the charity receives has to go towards that charitable object, that charitable purpose, to say, we've raised the money, we've won the contract, we've been gifted these pieces of equipment, these helicopters, say, in pursuit of achieving that charitable purpose. So that's the only thing that those things should be used towards. However, you can still use that money to pay people. So if people are doing services for the charity to help it achieve, then absolutely pay them and so on. So there are some kind of exemptions to that, but they're what you would expect. So hopefully pretty common sense. And there's a key thing within this in terms of where the money goes. So number 6 is about trustees. Now, it's an ongoing debate in the wider charity sector about whether trustees should be able to be paid or not for being trustees, because after all, it is a legal role you're taking on. You do devote your time to it. So should you be recognized for that in some way? Should you be recompensed for it in the way that you would be if you were a director of a company, say, or a social enterprise? Well, the rules about charities are quite specific and quite tight on this. And they say, as a trustee, you shouldn't receive any material benefit. You shouldn't gain any tangible benefit in terms of payments, gifts in kind, because the role of the trustee is to be an objective and impartial guardian in leading that charity. You shouldn't be swayed or unduly influenced by things that you might be getting personal gain from. So that's the idea behind this rule that exists in charity law as well. However, and always within rules, there are always workarounds, but in this instance, what Rule 6, Part 6 of the Constitution allows for, in plain English terms, is to say, but that can be flexed a bit. So it may be that as a trustee, you have a particular skill, or you're involved in a particular company that can give the charity something it needs. And you or your company are best placed to give the charity that support and service. And ordinarily, the charity would go out and pay for that. So it's reasonable that you should be paid, or your company should be paid for it too. Now, if that's the case, then there's obviously a conflict of interest there, because you have a personal stake in that transaction, but you're also a trustee. So how can you be sure that you are acting in the best interest of the charity as a trustee when you're also going to get something out of this? Well, it's a conflict of interest, and what this rule says is you should excuse yourself from that discussion and decision-making process. So it's okay as long as it's handled carefully and cleanly. Okay? And then Part 7 of the Constitution goes on to specify that in more detail. So if you have a conflict of interest, excuse yourself from that conversation and decision, and the other trustees will act without you just for that particular instance. Okay, so that's hopefully pretty straightforward. So we know what the charity is set up to do. We know that the broad sense of the powers it has, and the broad sort of powers that the trustees have, and how the money should be used. But let's kind of get the worst case scenarios out of the way first. Let's kind of, good news, bad news, always good to do bad news first. Well, what if it falls over? What if, despite the best efforts of you as trustees, the charity doesn't quite make it? It falls over, and in the falling over, the winding up of it, there are some outstanding bills and debts to be paid. Who picks those up? Well, the good news is a charitable incorporated organization is an incorporated entity, and that means that your liability as trustees is limited. And in the Constitution as it currently stands, that liability amounts to a big zero. You do not have to make any payments against any outstanding bills or debts that the charity has at the time that it winds up. Okay? As long as you've not acted fraudulently or illegally, then you are protected. Okay? And that seems fair, because you as trustees have given your time, your expertise freely and without payment. You've taken on legal responsibilities, so the charity is protecting you from that against any future claim. So let's pick up this idea of the trustees in a bit more detail. So the trustees themselves, so you as trustees, what powers do you have? Well, generally speaking, Section 9 of the Constitution says you have the powers that you would expect to have as a charity trustee. So in order to do your job, you have the power to make decisions, you have the power to commit the charity to enter into contracts, to employ people, and such like. Okay? It's pretty straightforward. But in particular, and there's a kind of an extra bit at the bottom here, if you as a trustee have a particular skill set, so let's say, for example, you're a bookkeeper or an accountant, that means that the charity expects you, and you are legally obliged as a trustee, to use those skills in your role in supporting the charity on its board. So that means taking a lead and getting involved in looking at budgets and accounts, preparing bids in terms of costings and pricings, because you have particular skills that the charity needs, so you should use those skills. And it may be that that's what it was that you were approached originally. You have a particular skill set that can benefit the charity. The charity can use, and in turn, that amplifies the good into the local community. So that's kind of a clarification point on that. How many of you can there be at any one time? So how many charity trustees can there be? Well, again, Constitution of Friends of Victoria Park has this set out. There must always be at least 3 trustees in number, but there can be no more than 12. That's because once you get more than 12 people around a table or on a Zoom call, it becomes quite hard to actually make a collective decision, to have a conversation without getting into lots of formal structures and, please chair, can I speak and can I second? It breaks down that kind of relationship and spontaneity that you need to have as trustees in how you approach things. And there's a question about how trustees are appointed. And you'll notice when you look at the Constitution, there's actually some handwritten notes on it here, and we'll come back to this in a moment, because the handwritten notes are the first trustees of the charity. So when Friends of Victoria Park CIO was registered as a charity, these names, these 5 people were the founding trustees. Now, the key thing to note is against their names, there are a set of periods. So Kath was appointed for 4 years, Christine for 3, Tom for 4, and so it goes. And there's maybe the question becomes, well, why were they appointed for different lengths of time? What's that about? Because the constitution of the charity has designed within it an encouragement for what's called succession, which means it's trying to stop the board becoming stale and stagnant. It's trying to encourage people in the community to keep coming forward, to keep that board refreshed, to stop people getting stuck and feeling that we always have to carry on because no one else is coming forward. So every time a trustee is now appointed, so if you're the new trustee, you've just been appointed, congratulations, your term of office is 3 years, 36 months. Now, you can always resign before then, we'll come to that a bit later. But that means that's a good length of time, because 3 years means the first year or so you're kind of getting in the feel of it. You're getting the hang of what it means to be a trustee in practice. You're getting to know your fellow trustees, working out the systems, the processes. Then you've got a good year, a year and a bit to really hammer at it, really getting stuck in. And then you kind of go, okay, the end of my term is coming up. So it's a chance to reflect and say, do I want to commit to another term of 3 years? Or is now a good time to think, okay, I've done a tour. It's time for me to step aside and encourage someone else to come forward, just to think about how you manage your succession as a trustee. That's really important in terms of those terms of office to go through as well. And that stops the board becoming destabilized. Because if the original charity trustees were all appointed for a term of 3 years, then potentially 3 years in, they might all stand down, and then the charity has a whole new board of people. That's quite a big shock and a change. There's not a lot of continuity and consistency there. Very disruptive, very dangerous. So having this staggered approach means that on a rolling cycle, 1 or 2 of the trustees each year are up for either re-election or to stand down and someone else be appointed. So it creates a natural cycle, and it's not too disruptive. Now, when those new trustees come in, as you've come in as a new trustee, hopefully, if everything's worked as it should have done, you'll have been given already a copy of this constitution in full. So you can read the rules, so you know what the charity says. And you'll also have been given the latest reports and accounts. So you know exactly where the charity is up to in terms of what it's doing and what's going on. Now, Friends of Victoria Park Stretford have kind of made a decision, say, there's this stuff which is the constitution, charity law, but we go beyond that. We're not satisfied just to do the basic tick box stuff. We think if you're going to do something, you do it properly and you do it well, which is why it's created this series of videos to supplement the legal induction that you were expected to have and you need to have to make sure you feel properly comfortable and confident in your role. Okay, now I mentioned before a few moments ago there about it may be that you decide to resign as a trustee. You get to the end of your 3 years and you say, that's it, it's time for me to move on. Or at some point before then, your circumstances may change and you say, actually, I can't carry on. Okay, it's not fair on the charity. I need to make a break before the 3 years is up. That's fine. So Section 12 of the Constitution sets out the reasons by which you unbecome a trustee, you untrustee in the charity. The first one, pretty straightforward, you choose to step away. So in which case you write a note, just as if you were in a job and you decide, it's not appropriate, I can't fulfill the role of this job anymore, things are changing, you write a letter of resignation and that's it. Alternatively, interestingly, the next reason is you don't turn up to meetings, you don't participate as a trustee. So and the Constitution as it currently stands says that's 6 months. So if you as a trustee fail to engage with or participate in any of the meetings of the trustees or the activities of the trustees for a period of at least 6 months, then you can be voted out. The other trustees can say, you're going to come off. If you've not been here for 6 months, it's not really working. And there's two reasons for that. Reason number one is it's not fair on your fellow trustees. Okay, you've been appointed. They don't know where you are. You apparently are not pulling your weight. Something's obviously gone wrong. And that also might be affecting their ability to take decisions. They may be struggling to reach quorum in the meeting. So they may not actually be able to hold the meetings they need to because you're not turning up and no one knows what's going on. And the reason on the other side of that is it's not fair on you. Okay, now you may remember from some of the previous sessions and these video clips that we put together, trustees stand together. Trustees make decisions that they are all collectively bound by. Now, if you're a trustee and you've been not part of those conversations and discussions and decisions, how fair is it on you that you are bound by them when you've not been part of them? So this also is about saying it's the other trustees are having to make decisions and carry on with stuff. It's not fair that you're being bound by that when you've not had opportunity to participate. So this is just about keeping things equitable on that side. Part C, you die. A trustee dies, then they're removed from office. Okay, worst case scenario. D, subsection D. Now this is the equivalent in terms of, so the analogy that I give here is it's a bit like getting a doctor's note. So if you're employed and you have an accident at work or you become unwell and you go and see your doctor, in the opinion of your doctor or another medical practitioner, they say, we feel you are not able, you are not fit for work. For the next 3 months, 6 weeks, you're signed off sick from work. Okay? This clause here, section D, is the equivalent of that. That says something's happened and you are not well enough, for whatever reason, to be able to hold the office of a trustee. And it's unfair to expect you to. So if medical practitioner says, you know what, you're not really up to this, it's unfair to ask you to do this, then the charity says, okay, we're not going to expect you to do it. Have a leave of absence. Your trusteeship is paused to allow you that space and time you need to work through whatever you need to. And that seems equitable and fair. And lastly, the last reason on the list for unbecoming a trustee, to untrusteeship yourself, is that you are disqualified from acting as a trustee. So you're declared bankrupt, or you've been investigated by the Charity Commission in connection with another charity that you're a trustee of, and some action is taken that says you off the lists. Okay. So those are the reasons. That's how you unbecome a trustee. So one is you do it of your own choice. Another is that you're given support of an absence. But hopefully going through that list and working them out in plain English and explaining some of the rationale behind them helps you to understand what may at first sight or first reading seem a bit harsh and unfair, but actually is in everyone's best interests, ultimately. So we mentioned already that charity trustee, as a trustee, you have a term of 3 years. What happens at the end of 3 years? At the end of 3 years, you can renew your trusteeship. You can stand for reappointment. Okay, so that's fine. Stand for reappointment, be re-elected, great. But you can only do that 3 times. You can only be a trustee for 3 consecutive terms. 3 plus 3 plus 3. You can't be a trustee of Friends of Victoria Park Stretford for more than 9 consecutive years without at least a break period. Okay, and again, that's really important because it stops you getting stayed and tired, and then you start to feel obliged to the charity, and you might want to move on, and it's not fair on either side. It also encourages the charity and the wider board of trustees to constantly be thinking about how are we encouraging new people to keep coming forward? How do we keep this board vibrant and responsive to the changing nature of the community? How do we make sure that when people look at the charity and they think, I might be interested in being a trustee, they don't look at the board and go, oh, but it's always been the same people since forever, so there's no point standing. It encourages that vibrancy to go through as well. Okay, so some of the practicalities of being a trustee when you meet. As trustees, you make decisions all the time that you meet. So you meet together and you take decisions. Now, you don't have to be physically around a table together to do that. You can do that electronically. You can have a phone conversation together, group telephone conference call, group video call, or you could set up a kind of an email chain letter as well. That kind of says, you just do a group email between yourselves. So it's not even in real time. You just pass it along to the next one. So that's how you can take decisions as trustees to pass things through. It may be as well that as trustees, you say, well, there's too much stuff. There's so much stuff we've got to look at. There's so many things we have to think about planning and so many things to review. We physically do not have the time as a collection of people to work through all this in the time that we can put to it. In which case, why not set up subcommittees or working groups? Okay, you delegate some of your powers to groups of other people to take a lead on doing some of those wider tasks and researching and planning and thinking. So the rules here, so section 14 of your constitution set out to say, if you're going to do that, that's fine. You've got the power to do it. And if you do, here's the prescribed set of protocols that you have to use. Each working group or subcommittee should have at least 2 people within it. And at least one of those people should be a trustee on the board. So there's a link, there's continuity and consistency. And it makes sure that that working group doesn't go off on a tangent too much. And there's a clear reporting back to the wider board. Now, these trustees themselves, when you make decisions, you have meetings. Now, when these meetings take place, we've already said, they don't have to be in person. They can be by electronic means, that's fine. As long as you can communicate with each other, you're there, you're in a meeting together. What's also interesting and relevant is that the Constitution does not prescribe when you should meet, how long you should meet for, or how often you should meet. It simply says you as trustees can be trusted to decide between yourselves how often and how you should meet to make sure things are being done properly. So it's up to you to determine that. Now, that may mean that there are periods where you need to meet every week or every month, or it may be that if things are established and going well, we just meet every few months, just as a review, and that's fine too. When you do meet, though, you'll need someone to chair the meetings. You need someone to act as a coordinator, a timekeeper, a referee to make sure the agenda's worked through. Now, that person chairing the meeting does not automatically have to be the named or nominated chair of the charity. You could have any one of the trustees do that. Okay, so this allows you the flexibility to do that. We've also then got issues about voting, making decisions that says if, wherever possible, we will try and come to unanimous agreement. We won't have those discussions or take decisions unless there's enough of us there, a quorum. So how many do we need to have? And the Constitution sets this out. There must be 2 or 1/3. 2 trustees or 1/3 of the total number of trustees is enough to be representative to make that decision. So at the moment, if there are 4 trustees, then you need 2 people in person to make that work. Okay, fair enough. If there are 9 trustees, then there must be at least 3 trustees to make it work, because 1/3 of 9 is 3 and 3 is greater than 2. Okay, so it's just about making sure that the charity doesn't start to become subverted by an individual or 1 or 2 people over the interests of the others, and keeping that balance. The other thing in terms of these decisions when you meet together is about what if you can't quite come to a decision by consensus? What if you have to call a vote? Show of hands, secret ballot, whatever it is. If that's the case, the Constitution is subsection C, makes provision to say whoever is chairing the meeting has the option, okay, they do not have to use, it's at their discretion, to have a casting vote. So if it's felt that we need, you as a group of trustees have a decision, you've got to make a decision on it here and now, it can be pushed through one way or another by whoever is chairing the meeting. Okay? So the provision is there to make that happen if you want. Now, the other thing about a charity, a CIO, charitable incorporated organization, is it has normally organizations have a membership. There are members and there are board directors or trustees as a board. Now, in the CIO model that Friends of Victoria Park have adopted, there's no separate class of legal members. The trustees, the trustees, also act as its members. You're a dual role status in leading the charity and safeguarding the governance. However, the charity's also decided to put a clause into its constitution, so number 17 here, that says we're going to create what is kind of what acts in practice, ironically, as a friends of type group. So a group of people who have no legal powers over the charity or within the charity, but do have a voice, can have influence. A group of people however they want to be structured, however you, the trustees, decide to define them and support them and enable them and facilitate them to meet and have conversations, to say, we're going to check in with this group of people or groups of people from time to time as a sounding board, as a consultation, just to see how we're doing, to work it that way. So very flexible arrangement to the governance. And it's up to you as the trustees to review this associate or informal membership classes as you go along. If they need to change, you can change them. If they need to grow, you can grow them. It's up to you how you manage that. Okay, now in terms of some of the scenarios that we work through, so working through this idea of this is how we meet, this is who a trustee is, but okay, so we know how decisions are taken, we know when meetings happen, but hang on a minute, there's a scenario that said earlier on, we highlighted that if someone's disqualified from being a trustee, that means they stop being a trustee of Friends of Victoria Park, Stretford. But what happens if we had a meeting, they were part of that meeting, but we didn't realize at the time that they'd been disqualified because they hadn't received the notification. Okay, well, if that's the case, we've got these clauses called the saving provisions. And what these mean in plain English is, if that trustee and the other trustees, when they met, all acted in good faith and good honesty and said, okay, as far as we know, we're all still fine to act as trustees. And then it's subsequently found out that actually, we shouldn't have, that person shouldn't have been part of that meeting. You know, their term in office had lapsed, or we didn't realize. Then it's okay. That decision, that meeting, those conversations still stands. You don't have to undo them and go back and do them all again because you all acted in good faith. So it's a kind of saving provision that says if someone makes an honest mistake, something gets missed in all, without any kind of sense of maliciousness, it's okay. Mistakes happen and we just kind of move on. So some of the boring administration bits now, just to kind of give you a bit of a checklist approach. The charity is obliged to keep registers and records. It's got to keep a register of who its trustees are, and it's got to keep a record of its meetings as it goes through as well. The constitution here kind of spells out the detail, the checklist. What do we have to keep? How do we have to keep it? Why do we have to keep it that way? 26 also gives you a provision as trustees to say, this is our constitution. This is the stuff that's set out in charity law. This is the kind of the 10 commandments, the kind of the big headline stuff. But it doesn't really talk about why we're doing this in the way we're doing it. For example, there's the section about an associate class of membership, the informal non-voting members. This constitution, it's not the place of this constitution to define how those are structured, why they're structured that way, how it works in practice. So you as trustees have the power to create extra rules on your own judgment. So you can create these things called bylaws or secondary rules, which are about how you take these legal constitution clauses and references and translate them into plain English and how they're applied and worked through in day-to-day life, in the day-to-day running of the charity. So you've got the power to do that and do it as it goes, okay? So that's great. The other thing is, of course, there's the scenario that says, what happens if we have a falling out? What happens if, as trustees, we have a grievance between each other? You said this, we thought that. I'm sure they can't do that. Wow. Bit of a playground fight starts breaking out. Well, if that's the case, you can go to mediation. You can go to litigation. But the Constitution says we expect you to behave like grown-ups, like adults. Try and work it out amongst yourselves. If that doesn't work, then go to mediation. If that doesn't work, litigation is there as a last resort. So that sets out those steps as we go through. But again, secondary rules and bylaws, policies and procedures, that would detail how you would work out those grievances before needing to recognize that, okay, we need mediation on this. So these kind of supplementary processes around it. Okay, again, so we started with a kind of a worst case scenario, the liability of members if things wind up. And as we get to the end of the Constitution, this rears its head again. So what happens is the charity's had a life. We've had trustees, we've had meetings, good stuff's happened, we've kept records, we've done reports, things have gone well. But the charity has now come, Friends of Victoria Park has come to the end of its natural life because, for example, miraculously, because of the efforts of the charity and others, people in Stretford now have perfect lives. So the charity says there's no need to carry on. We've job done. Okay, why carry on when we don't need to? Let's celebrate that and go on to our next adventure as well. So the charity there's provision in the Constitution say this is how we wind ourselves up. This is how we call it a day. Close the doors, pack everything away, and put it on. So the steps in this clause is that say we have a meeting, we consult, we let the regulators know, and if there's any remaining assets, so any money in the bank, any buildings, helicopters, intellectual property, those assets must be gifted on to another charity. They must be protected in purpose going forward. And that's it. That's your kind of plain English, translation matrix guide to the Friends of Victoria Park Stretford CIO's constitution. The key structural components of it, what they mean in practice, and hopefully a bit of explanation as to why it is like that. What's the thought process behind this rule being what it is? And then even if you don't agree with it, you can appreciate why it has to be that way. But so what? Okay, you've gone through this, you now understand what's in it, how it fits together. What I'd encourage you to do is have a chat with another trustee, or if you're a trustee to be, with another trustee to be, or someone else, and just say, is there anything in all of this that makes you think, I hadn't really expected that. That's a bit of a surprise. I'm not quite sure why that is as it is. I've never come across that before. So have a chat with other people. What's going on that you maybe weren't expecting, good or bad or other? And equally important, that question about asking, try and be honest and say, within those clauses, within those provisions, is there anything that makes you think, you know what, I'm a bit worried that actually I'm going to struggle with this part. There's that thing I'm not quite sure I can do that well. So I might need some extra support. If that's the case, hold your hand up now, go to the other trustees or the secretary or the chair and say, I think I might need an extra hand. How do we make sure that this thing, whatever I'm concerned about, won't be an issue? Better to flag these things up now. Now you know the rules and you know the expectations as far as the Constitution is concerned, so it won't be a problem for you in the future. But hopefully, at the very least, as you go through this, these now makes a bit more sense. Charity constitutions are written in charity law, sometimes a bit hard to understand and translate. Hopefully, you've been encouraged through this session that you now feel a bit more confident about what's in it, why that's there, and what it means for you as a trustee in practice in your role of leading and safeguarding that vision of Friends of Victoria Park Stretford. There's some other sessions in this series, so if you haven't watched those already, I'd encourage you to do so, because they're the wraparound in terms of understanding some of the day-to-day implications of how this constitution is enacted, the principles behind it. But ultimately, I hope you found it of interest, and I hope you enjoy your journey and adventures as a trustee of the Friends of Victoria Park Stretford.